The nature run-amok trope is a staple of low-budget horror films, with every creature under the sun seemingly getting its moment of vengeance. We've been terrorized by killer sharks, bombarded by angry birds, constricted by snakes, and even eaten by alligators. But then there's Frogs, a movie that dares to ask, what if a group of amphibians backed by their equally cranky woodland pals decided to teach humans a lesson? It's as ridiculous as it sounds, yet somehow this eco-horror oddity delivers a blend of camp, commentary, and critters that's too bizarre to ignore. In a swampy symphony of nature's wrath, Frogs takes the "don't mess with Mother Nature" mantra to riveting new heights. Directed by George McCowan, the movie positions nature as both a victim of human exploitation and an active agent of vengeance, making its message clear: humanity's environmental abuses will not go unpunished. Despite its absurd premise, Frogs offers intriguing layers of subtext, exploring themes of arrogance, family dysfunction, and ecological justice. Set against the backdrop of a secluded southern estate, the film begins with Pickett Smith played by Sam Elliott, who is a freelance photographer and environmentalist, navigating a swamp by canoe. While photographing pollution caused by the wealthy Crockett family who own the estate, Smith's peaceful exploration is interrupted when a reckless motorboat piloted by siblings Clint and Karen Crockett nearly capsize him. After apologizing, they invite him to their family's sprawling estate, where Smith becomes an unwitting observer of both human dysfunction and nature's growing unrest. The estate is ruled by the patriarch of the Crockett family, Jason Crockett, a wheelchair-bound, typical rich movie villain character celebrating his birthday over the 4th of July weekend. Crockett embodies human arrogance, maintaining rigid control over his family and dismissing any concerns about the environmental damage caused by his land management practices. Jason Crockett just wants to celebrate his birthday and doesn't want the growing animal population near his estate to ruin it. Crockett orders a character named Grover to eliminate the overpopulating frogs near the house because their constant noise might spoil his birthday. Sam Elliott's character Smith later discovers Grover's corpse covered in snake bites in a nearby swamp not far from Crockett's house, and Crockett orders him not to mention it to anyone else. As the weekend unfolds, nature begins to exact its revenge in increasingly sinister ways. Animals from the surrounding swamp launch coordinated attacks on the Crockett family, targeting them one by one. First, Michael, Jason Crockett's grandson, accidentally shoots himself in the calf. He then becomes ensnared in a trap of vines and webs, surrounded by an overwhelming swarm of tarantulas that eat him alive. Next, Michael's brother Ken is sent to get flowers for their mother Iris. While he is picking the flowers, Ken is swarmed by lizards who knock over bottles of poison, killing him. Pickett Smith recognizes the growing danger posed by the aggressive animals surrounding the estate and urges the Crockett family to leave the island. However, Jason Crockett, the stubborn patriarch, refuses to acknowledge the severity of the situation. His insistence that nothing, especially not nature, will ruin his birthday reflects his deep-seated arrogance and his inability to grasp the consequences of his actions toward the environment. The deaths escalate in violence and ridiculousness, with Iris, while chasing a butterfly, is frightened by snakes and baby alligators, and in a panic, falls into a puddle where leeches latch onto her. Exhausted and badly injured, she falls near a rattlesnake, which kills her instantly with its venomous bite. Her husband Stuart searches for her and blunders into a mud pit, where 2 alligators eat him alive. On Smith's advice, the family butler and maid decide to leave, along with Ken's fiancée, Bella Garrington. Clint takes them across the lake in his speedboat. As Clint investigates the abandoned dock, a flock of golden eagles attack the butler, maid, and Bella, forcing them to flee. Clint discovers his boat is adrift and swims to reach it, but a water moccasin bites him to death. His wife Jenny tries to rescue him but gets stuck in the riverbank, only to be attacked and killed by a snapping turtle. In the final act, Pickett and Karen, who originally met in the beginning of the film, decide to take Karen's niece and nephew and escape the island in a canoe, leaving behind a landscape overrun by vengeful wildlife. Meanwhile, Jason Crockett, still unwilling to abandon his home, is left alone. Karen and Smith cross the lake in Smith's canoe, encountering an alligator and water moccasins, which Smith dispatches with a boat paddle and a shotgun. They make it to shore, where they discover the butler, the maid, and Bella's bloodied belongings. They reach the road and hitch a ride with a woman and her son, who tell their guests about the absence of highway traffic. As they head towards Jefferson City, the son shows them a huge frog he took from summer camp. That night, now alone, Crockett witnesses hundreds of frogs breaking into the house and staring at him. As the atmosphere intensifies, he collapses and dies as the frogs swarm him. The film ends ominously, with the deafening croaks of the frogs signaling the reclamation of the estate by the nature the humans tried to overtake. Frogs is a quintessential example of the nature strikes back subgenre of eco-horror, blending environmental commentary with the campy, low-budget aesthetics that define many films of its era. Despite its often absurd premise, Frogs offers intriguing layers of subtext, exploring themes of arrogance, family dysfunction, and ecological justice. At its core, Frogs critiques the unchecked industrialism of the 20th century. The Crockett family estate, with its manicured grounds and heavy pesticide use, represents humanity's attempts to dominate and control the natural world. Stylistically, Frogs balances camp and tension. The animal attack sequences are often absurdly theatrical, with unlikely killers like turtles and geckos taking center stage. Yet, this very absurdity contributes to the film's charm, offering moments of unintentional humor that have endeared it to cult audiences. However, making the entire concept more absurd is the fact that horror movie titled Frogs never actually shows frogs killing anyone. It always ends up being different woodland creatures doing the dirty jobs. The film's primary flaw lies in its lack of subtlety. The message of environmental justice is hammered home without much nuance, making it feel preachy at times. Released the same year that the DDT pesticide was finally banned, it was one of several eco-horror films to come out of the 1970s warning of man's destructive tendencies toward nature, so maybe it fits more for that time than now. But regardless, these weaknesses are part of what makes Frogs a fascinating artifact of 1970s horror cinema. It's a film unafraid to lean into its absurd premise while delivering a pointed critique. At the end of the day, Frogs is less about saving the planet and more about watching people get outsmarted by lizards, spiders, and yes, an army of frogs that mostly just sit there croaking menacingly. Sure, it has a message about humanity's place in nature, but let's be honest. The real joy of Frogs comes from watching wealthy, oblivious people get their comeuppance in the weirdest ways possible. It's a campy, creature-filled ride that proves one thing. Sometimes even frogs deserve their moment to shine.